Hi, I'm Umbreon Libris, and recently in my community tab and on Twitter, I asked you for ideas of Pokemon design archetypes that fans like to complain about. And there were so many ideas, like to the point that I think very few Pokemon would fall outside of all of those categories. So what I originally thought would be a single video has now turned into a series where I look at these archetypes and talk about them mostly from a creature design perspective. Sometimes it'll be a defense of that archetype, and sometimes it'll be, no, yeah, I agree, this sucks. But as usual, this is all very subjective, so you'll have to tell me in the comments just how wrong I am. What better way to start this series than talking about Pikachu and its clone? So thank you Ethan and Sleepy Esper who suggested Pikachu Clones. And we have to begin by talking about Pikachu itself, the one that started this whole trend. Everyone knows that Pikachu wasn't always meant to be the mascot, but it was always popular, even in the early internal polls that Game Freak used to decide which Pokemon to include in the games. Koji Nishino apparently loved Pikachu so much he didn't want it to be easy to find, so he tucked it away in Viridian Forest with low encounter rate, but because Pikachu was cute and it was rare, everyone wanted to have one, everyone went looking for one, and so the plan backfired and everyone had one. And it's easy to see what made Pikachu popular even when it still looked like this. It's small and chubby and it's got the big head and the big eyes, so it triggers that "aw, baby animal" instinct even when the head didn't have that much separation from the body. By the way, this is my favorite Pikachu look. It's not quite the original, it has a bit more definition than that, but it's also not fully mascotified. The head and body are still pretty continuous. I also really like this look though, with the really long tail. Original Raichu has that extra level of body definition. I think it would be interesting to see a fully mascotified version of Raichu. But overall, I do think it loses some of that cuteness of Pikachu, and especially in the sprites from Red and Green, Raichu doesn't really have that much to offer. Later on, I do think that the design gained some more personality, but if it didn't have that early popularity, I can see why they chose Pikachu over Raichu to be the mascot. Raichu was also originally planned to have a second evolution called Gorochu. This is my rendition of it. It was supposed to have horn and fangs, and as much as I would have liked to see that come to life, I think they probably made the right call. At least from the perspective of keeping Pikachu iconic. Back then, the main reason for the cut was space limitations, and they wanted to have more variety to the Pokedex rather than longer evolution lines. But today, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if Game Freak regretted even Raichu a little bit. Not for itself, I think that Raichu is great, but I do think that it muddies that iconic image of Pikachu a little bit. I mean, all modern Pikachu clones are single stage for a reason, so I think adding Gorochu to that probably would have made it worse. Generation 2 sort of didn't have a Pikachu clone. There was Meryl, which was referred to as Pikablu by fans, but I think that's more of a shorthand because of their very superficial similarities, and Meryl was never really meant to be that much like Pikachu. Comparing the two, sure, you can say that Meryl is like Pikachu, but blue. But Meryl has none of the iconic characteristics of Pikachu. The tail, the ears, the colors are all different. And Meryl doesn't have the most iconic feature, the cheeks. Pichu, though, is usually referred to as a Pikachu clone, but I'm not sure that that's apt. Because it looks like Pikachu, yeah, but it evolves into Pikachu. I don't think there's any way that it could not look like it. And maybe Pichu was designed intentionally as the mascot, but a baby, like we've seen a lot of recently. Something that I think is interesting is how the evolution of Pichu's design matches that of Pikachu, but more pronounced. In the Pokemon Gold beta from 1997, Pichu looked like this. A yellow ball with a face and ears. And that feels like a great baby form for the original definitionless Pikachu. But the final design of Pichu feels like a great baby for the modern Pikachu. Look at that body, at that head. And back in Generation 2, Pikachu still looked like this, not fully mascotified, so I think that Pichu might have actually served to accelerate or augment the mascotization process for Pikachu. Oh, and even though I don't think Pichu is a Pikachu clone, it does share an interesting characteristic with the true clones. Well, some of them anyway. And that is representing something unique about that generation. Not every Pikachu clone has this, but many of them do, and I'll mention them as we go. For Pichu, it is being a baby Pokemon. It represents one of the most prominent new features of Generation 2, breeding. And if every Pikachu clone had something like this, I think overall their existence might be more justified. The first true Pikachu clones were Plezzle and Minun in Generation 3. They look a lot like Pichu actually, the head and the body shape are very similar, and like Pichu, they represent something unique about Generation 3, double battles. I like Plezzle and Minun, I think they're cute, and I like their gimmick. They have the most unique cheeks of all of the Pikachu clones, but I think they're a little bit too plain for how similar they look. Maybe they should have been two different forms of the same Pokemon, like the plus form and the minus form with the different abilities. That might have made them stand out a little bit more. You wouldn't be able to use them together competitively, but who's going to use Plezzle and Minun competitively anyway? And that's actually another feature of Pikachu clones that makes them not be that well liked in general. Their stats tend to be pretty poor. So by using them on your team, you're sort of giving yourself a higher difficulty. Even though Pachirisu, the Generation 4 Pikachu clone, became famous for being on Seijun Park's World Championship team in 2014, so we know that they can be used effectively, none of them are really good enough to be all that appealing. Pachirisu, as well as Emolga from Generation 5, occupy what to me feels like a weird space for Pikachu clones. They are the ones that look the least like Pikachu. They still have the body shape and the eyes are very similar, but they also look decently unique. Their colors are more different, and they have prominent features that make them stand out, with Pachirisu's tail and Emolga's wings and its tail as well. But they're also pretty boring. I think they would have stood out more if they weren't Pikachu clones. Like, at least remove the cheeks, but maybe make them not electric as well. And they also don't represent anything really unique about their generations. So Pachirisu and Emolga, despite being some of the more unique Pikachu clones, also feel like the most blah. Not that Dedenne is much better. I like its antenna whiskers, and most of the other Pikachu clones are actually, all of them I think, don't even have whiskers. And it does have the fairy type, the special feature for Generation 6, but it still does look like a tiny Raichu. There's an interesting change in the Pikachu clone trend here though, whereas Plezzle and Minun and Pachirisu and Emolga have the more elongated body of Pichu and of the modern Pikachu design, Dedenne and all of the clones that followed have a more pudgy look leaning on the OG Pikachu. Generation 7, maybe because it was the 20th anniversary, introduced 3 contenders for the role of Pikachu clone, although the only one that I consider a true clone is Togedemaru. Togedemaru, to me, is a lot like Pachirisu and Emolga. It's not that much like Pikachu, it's mostly in the eyes and the cheeks and just a little bit of the color, but it's also a design that I don't think really offers anything special. Then there's Alolan Raichu, which is the way that Game Freak found for the Pikachu family to be represented in regional forms, which is the special feature of Generation 7, so I like that. But I don't really like Alolan Raichu any better than Cantonian Raichu. I love that it is surfing on its own tail and how that references the surfing Pikachu from Generation 1, but at the same time I think that it loses a little bit of the Cantonian Raichu charm. And the last one from Generation 7 is simultaneously the truest clone and the most definitely not a clone. Mimikyu has lore reasons to look like Pikachu, it wants to look like a Pikachu, and the design is shameless about that. But it's also not at all like Pikachu. It's not an electric-type mammal Pokemon. It has a great ability that is paired with good stats and a good moveset. So its similarities to Pikachu are purely superficial. So I don't think Mimikyu should count as a Pikachu clone, but if it is one, it is the most successful one. Pokemon Sword and Shield also introduced 3 contenders, but again, I think only one of them is a true Pikachu clone. One of them is Gigantamax Pikachu, so definitely not a clone, but worth mentioning here anyway, mostly because of how it really leans on that original pudgy Pikachu look. And it does highlight the major feature of the generation. So it's actually kind of interesting how that major feature thing, which started with Pichu, a member of the Pikachu family, and then shifted away from them to Plezzle and Minun and then Dedenne, has now shifted back to the Pikachu family with Alolan Raichu and now Gigantamax Pikachu. Which probably makes sense to give the new feature of the generation to your mascot. Then there's Yamper, which I think was originally thought to be the Pikachu clone, which, if it were, would have been a huge departure from the trend. Aside from being a small electric mammal and having a little bit of a similar color scheme, Yamper doesn't really share anything with the other Pikachu clones. And it evolves, which is honestly kind of a baffling element of the trend. Like I said earlier, Game Freak might be regretting making Raichu a little bit because it sort of muddies the iconic image of Pikachu. So that's probably why the later true clones don't evolve. A Togedemaru will always look like a Togedemaru. But the thing is that, unlike Pikachu, the clones haven't really had that much staying power. I think they were all featured prominently within their generation, either in the games or in the anime or both, but not really beyond their generation. And if they were given an evolution, maybe they would have. I know I pay way more attention to Pokemon that either can evolve or are evolved. But the one true Pikachu clone of Generation 8 is Morpeko. Morpeko? Morpeko. Okay, in Japanese it is Morupeko. Morupeko. So, Morpeko. This one has it all. The type, the cheeks, the small pudgy body. This thing looks so much like a Pikachu that when I first spotted it, I thought it was a Pikachu. It even has a Pikachu tail pattern on its back. And it doesn't evolve, although it does have an alternate form because of its ability, which makes it look like an evil Pikachu, which is sort of what it is. Morpeko doesn't show off any new features of Generation 8, but being a dark type, it is fitting thematically. Usually dark type is reserved for antagonists, but in Pokemon Sword and Shield, they turn things around on us, and the people you thought were antagonists turn out to be misunderstood good guys. And we also have both a rival and a gym leader who use dark type, so Morpeko sort of symbolizes that greater acceptance of dark types not all being evil, no matter what the type is called in Japanese. Morpeko is, to me, kind of like the opposite of Pachirisu and Emolga. It's the Pikachu clone that looks the most like a Pikachu, but it's also the one that feels the most unique, all things considered. And because of that, I think Morpeko is the most successful of the true Pikachu clones. Okay, so this video turned out to be a lot longer than I originally intended. I probably won't go through every example of an archetype in future analyses, but in this case, it felt appropriate. I look forward to reading what your thoughts are on Pikachu clones. Me, I don't mind them as an archetype, but I do wish they offered more variety overall. I hope you're looking forward to more episodes of this series. I know I'm looking forward to making them. Thank you for watching, and thank you to my patrons, especially luxury patron Ethan Saffron. I'm Aubryon Libris. I'll see you in the next chapter. What better way to start this series than to talk about... Oh, come on, me!